To the Roman Empire, Judea was a small and distant province. But there was one problem: this land almost never knew peace. At first glance, this seems strange. How could such a small territory on the edge of a vast empire trouble a state that controlled almost the entire known world? But the Romans had their reasons to worry. Judea stood constantly on the edge of revolt. The people who lived here were unlike most others in the empire. Rome usually worked in a simple way. Conquered peoples accepted Roman rule, paid their taxes, worshipped their own gods, and slowly became part of the empire. But in Judea, everything was different. For the Jews, there was only one God, and so they could not accept the divinity of the Roman emperor. To Rome, this looked dangerous, because the empire rested not only on its army, but also on submission. Any movement that gathered crowds of people, the Romans began to see as a potential threat, especially in Jerusalem. This was not just a city, it was a center of faith, of temples, of religious power, and of vast popular hopes. During the great festivals, tens of thousands of pilgrims poured into Jerusalem. The city overflowed with people, and with the people, the tension grew. The Roman authorities understood it well. A single spark was enough to set off a revolt. That is why Roman soldiers were always stationed in Jerusalem. They watched the crowds, they looked for any sign of unrest, and they were ready to crush a rebellion at any moment. The crucifixions along the roads were not just executions, they were a warning. Rome was making it clear any resistance would be destroyed. But the greater the pressure became, the more the people longed for freedom. Many believed that one day a man would come, sent by God, the Messiah, a deliverer, a king who would restore justice and free the people from foreign rule. These hopes slowly spread through the whole of society. People argued, preachers gathered followers around them, prophets wandered through the deserts, and a feeling grew among the people. That great change was coming. But who exactly shaped the religious life of Judea in this troubled time? Who taught the people? Who held the power? Whom did the people trust? And why was their society so deeply divided? To understand the story of the New Testament, we need to meet the people who surrounded Jesus in that age, those who listened to him, those who argued with him, and those who shaped the fate of the land. When a modern person hears the words Pharisees or Sadducees, they usually imagine nothing more than religious groups from an ancient Bible. But in the first century, it was far more complex. These were people who shaped the life of Judea almost every day. In the streets of Jerusalem, they were respected. They were argued with. And at the same time, they were feared. Let us begin with the Pharisees. Theirs is the name that appears most often in the Gospels. But contrary to popular belief, the Pharisees were not simply villains from a biblical story. In many ways, they were a movement of people who sincerely tried to preserve the faith of their nation in the hard years of Roman occupation. The Pharisees studied the law with great care. From childhood, they memorized the sacred texts. They watched over tradition and over religious purity. Many ordinary people in Judea respected them precisely for their devotion. But over time, the rules grew stricter and far more numerous. Religion slowly became not only a matter of faith, but also a system of control over a person's daily life. Hundreds of small rules appeared. What one was allowed to do, how one should eat, how to keep the Sabbath, whom one could associate with. This is why the conflicts between Jesus and the Pharisees would later become so sharp. But there were others, the Sadducees, a completely different world. If the Pharisees were closer to the common people, the Sadducees more often belonged to the wealthy elite of Jerusalem. Many of them were tied to the temple, to religious power, to money, to politics. For the Sadducees, the most important thing was to preserve order, because any revolt against Rome could end in catastrophe for the whole nation, and so many of them chose to cooperate with Roman rule. But there was yet another more mysterious group, the Essenes. The Gospels say almost nothing about them directly, yet it is with them that many scholars connect the famous Dead Sea Scrolls. The Essenes withdrew from society. They lived in communities in the desert, among the stones, the heat, and the silence of the Judean wilderness. They followed very strict rules, they prayed often, and they waited for God to intervene in